Hey there, friends. Let's jump right into a super cool story. Picture this, it's a regular Saturday for a guy named Jake Miller. You know those days the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and everything feels calm and happy. Jake was just hanging out at his house, maybe sitting on his couch with a big glass of cold lemonade in his hand. He'd take a sip, smile, and think, wow, life is pretty great today. That's the kind of day it was. Nothing big, nothing loud, just nice and quiet. Jake liked it that way. He wasn't the kind of person who made a lot of noise or tried to get everyone's attention. Nope, he was chill. He was happy just doing his own thing. Now, Jake was new in this town. He had moved into a little house on a street full of other houses that all looked kind of the same: white fences, green lawns, and flowers by the doors. It was a pretty normal neighborhood, the kind where kids ride bikes and dogs bark at squirrels. But Jake? He hadn't met many people yet. He'd wave if someone walked by, but most folks didn't even know his name. He was like a mystery guy, keeping to himself, not bothering anybody. He'd go to work, come home, and that was it. Simple. Easy. No fuss. But here's the thing: not everyone liked that Jake was so quiet. Someone was watching him. And I don't mean just peeking out a window once in a while. Nope, this person was watching him, like a hawk staring at a little mouse. Her name was Karen. Oh yeah, that Karen. You've probably heard of people like her before. She wasn't just any neighbor, she was the boss of the street. People called her the HOA Queen. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, which is like a club that makes rules for the neighborhood. And Karen? She loved those rules more than anything. She loved telling people what to do. If your grass grew too tall, she'd knock on your door. If your trash can was out too long, she'd write you a note. She ruled that street like it was her own little kingdom, and she wanted everyone to know it. From the very first day Jake moved in, Karen had her eyes on him. She didn't like strangers. She didn't like new people showing up and changing things. The moment she saw Jake carrying boxes into his house, she stood on her porch with her arms crossed, squinting at him like he was up to no good. Who is this guy, she probably thought. He doesn't look like he fits here. She didn't say hi. She didn't wave. She just watched. And not in a nice way, like a teacher watching a kid she thinks is going to break a rule. Karen didn't trust Jake one bit. She didn't know anything about him, but that didn't matter. To her, he was trouble just because he was new. But here's the fun part: Karen had no idea who Jake really was. She thought he was just some random guy, someone she could boss around or scare off. She didn't know he had a secret. A big one. A secret so cool it was going to turn everything upside down. Jake wasn't loud about it. He didn't brag or tell anyone. He just kept it to himself, like a treasure hidden in a box. And that secret? It was going to shake things up big time. Not just for Karen, but for the whole neighborhood. Oh yeah, things were about to get wild. Let's rewind a bit and talk about Jake's first day in the neighborhood. He pulled up in a little truck with all his stuff: some boxes, a chair, a lamp. Nothing fancy. He wasn't rich or anything. He just wanted a quiet place to live. The house he picked was small, with a red door and a tiny porch. It looked cozy, like a house you'd see in a picture book. Jake liked it right away. He carried his boxes inside, set up his couch, and thought, this is home now. He didn't have a big plan to meet everyone or throw a party. He just wanted to settle in and relax. The neighbors saw him moving in, of course. A few peeked out their windows, curious about the new guy. One old man watering his flowers gave Jake a little nod, like, hey, welcome. A kid riding a scooter waved. But most people? They didn't really care. New people come and go all the time, right? No big deal. Jake didn't mind. He wasn't here to make a splash. He just wanted to live his life. Maybe mow the lawn, watch some TV, and sip that lemonade on Saturdays. That was Jake, simple and easygoing. But Karen? She wasn't easygoing at all. The second she saw Jake, her brain went into overdrive. She didn't like how quiet he was. She didn't like that he didn't come over and say hi to her. In her mind, that was rude. Good neighbors introduce themselves, she'd say to herself. Good neighbors follow the rules. And to Karen, Jake didn't seem like he'd follow her rules. She didn't have proof he was bad or anything, she just had a feeling. And Karen trusted her feelings more than facts. So, she decided right then and there, Jake was a problem. She didn't know his name yet, but she was already planning to keep an eye on him. Let me tell you a little more about Karen, because she's a big part of the story. Karen lived 3 houses down from Jake. Her house was perfect, grass cut just right, flowers in neat rows, not a speck of dirt anywhere. She had a big sign in her yard that said HOA President, like it was a trophy. She wore bright shirts and carried a clipboard everywhere, ready to write down anything she didn't like. If a kid left a toy in the yard, she'd march over and complain. If someone parked their car a little crooked, she'd leave a note. Everyone knew Karen. Some people liked her because she kept the street looking nice. But most people? They were a little scared of her. She was bossy, loud, and didn't take no for an answer. Jake didn't know any of this yet. He didn't know Karen was the queen of the street. He didn't know she was watching him unpack his boxes, thinking, I bet he's going to break a rule soon. All he knew was that he had a new house and a fresh start. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't trying to make enemies. But trouble? It was already looking for him. And its name was Karen. The first time Jake noticed Karen was a few days after he moved in. He was outside, sweeping his porch, when he saw her standing across the street. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, staring at him. Her arms were crossed, and her face looked grumpy, like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. Jake waved, because that's what nice people do. Hi there, he called out. But Karen didn't wave back. She didn't smile. She just turned and walked away, muttering something under her breath. Jake scratched his head, confused. Weird, he thought. Maybe she's just having a bad day. He didn't know it yet, but that was Karen's normal face when it came to him. Days went by, and Jake started to settle in. He mowed his lawn not because Karen told him to, but because he liked it neat. He put a little welcome mat by his door that said hi, in big letters. He even hung a bird feeder in his tree, hoping some birds would stop by. It was all normal stuff, the kind of thing any new neighbor might do. But to Karen, it wasn't normal. She didn't trust him. Why's he so quiet, she'd wonder. What's he hiding? She started walking by his house more often, peeking over his fence, checking his trash cans. She was like a detective, but not a good one. She didn't have clues, just a hunch that Jake was up to something. Now, let's talk about Jake's secret for a second. I won't tell you what it is yet, don't worry, you'll find out later. But I'll give you a hint, Jake wasn't just a regular guy with a regular job. He had something special about him, something nobody in that neighborhood could guess. Not even Karen, with all her spying and grumbling. He kept it hidden, like a card up his sleeve. He didn't talk about it, didn't show it off. He just went about his days, acting like everything was normal. But deep down, he knew his secret was a big deal. And one day, it was going to come out. Karen didn't know any of this, of course. She just saw a quiet guy in a quiet house, and it drove her nuts. She liked control. She liked knowing everything about everyone. And Jake? He was a puzzle she couldn't figure out. That made her mad. It made her watch him even more. Every time he stepped outside, she'd be there, maybe hiding behind her curtains or pretending to water her flowers. She'd squint at him, thinking, I'll catch him doing something wrong. I know he's trouble. But Jake didn't do anything wrong. He just lived his life, sipping his lemonade, enjoying his Saturdays. One day, something small happened that made Karen even more suspicious. Jake got a package delivered to his porch. It was just a box, nothing weird. Maybe some socks or a book, normal stuff. But Karen saw the delivery guy drop it off, and her brain went wild. What's in that box, she thought. Why's he getting packages already? He just moved in. She didn't ask him, of course. That would be too easy. Instead, she stood by her mailbox, pretending to check her letters, watching Jake pick up the box and take it inside. To her, that box was proof. Proof of what? She didn't know. But she was sure it was something bad. Jake didn't notice Karen staring that time. He was too busy opening his package. Yep, it was just socks. He smiled, put them in his drawer, and went back to his day. He had no idea Karen was building a whole story in her head about him. He didn't know she was already planning ways to make his life harder. To Karen, Jake wasn't just a new neighbor. He was a challenge. A mystery she had to solve. And she wasn't going to stop until she figured him out or got rid of him. So, that's where our story starts. A quiet guy named Jake, a nosy lady named Karen, and a secret waiting to pop out like a jack-in-the-box. Things were calm for now, but not for long. Something big was coming, and it was going to turn this little neighborhood upside down. What would you do if someone was spying on you all the time? Would you ignore them, talk to them, or maybe spy back? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your ideas. Stick around, because this story's just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Alright, friends, let's get into the juicy part of the story. Things are about to heat up between Jake and Karen. You remember Karen, right? The HOA queen who thought she owned the whole street? Well, she wasn't sneaky at all. She didn't tiptoe around or whisper her complaints. Nope, she was loud and proud about it. Every time she saw something she didn't like at Jake's house, she'd grab her clipboard like it was her superhero shield and march right up to his porch. Her shoes would clomp on the sidewalk, and her face would be all scrunched up, like she'd just smelled something bad. She'd bang on Jake's door or just yell loud enough for him to hear her through the window. Your grass is 1 inch too tall, she'd snap, pointing at his lawn like it was a big crime scene. Or she'd say, that mailbox isn't the right size. It's against the rules. Her voice was sharp, like a teacher scolding a kid who forgot their homework. She'd wave that clipboard around, flipping through pages of rules she'd written herself, acting like Jake had broken every single one. To her, everything he did was wrong. If his trash can was out 5 minutes too late, she'd complain. If his curtains weren't the right color, she'd grumble. Nothing was ever good enough for Karen. Jake, though. He didn't fight back. Not out loud, anyway. When Karen came stomping over with her big list of problems, he'd just stand there on his porch, looking at her with calm eyes. He'd nod his head a little, like he was listening, and say, "Okay, I'll fix it." His voice was soft, not mad or mean. He didn't yell or argue. He'd just agree, even if he didn't want to. Maybe he'd go grab his lawnmower later and cut the grass. Or he'd measure his mailbox and shrug, thinking, it looks fine to me. He kept his cool every single time. To anyone watching, Jake seemed like the chillest guy ever, someone who didn't let anything bother him. But here's the thing: inside, Jake wasn't so calm. Oh no. Deep down, under that quiet face, he was boiling. Not like water on the stove, but like a volcano getting ready to blow. Every time Karen barked at him, every time she pointed her finger or rolled her eyes, it made him mad. Really mad. He didn't show it, though. He didn't clench his fists or raise his voice. He kept all that anger locked up tight, like a secret treasure chest. But it was there, growing bigger every day. Karen didn't know it, but she was poking a bear that wasn't going to sleep forever. See, Karen didn't just nag Jake. She didn't just tell him what to do and walk away. She judged him. She looked at him like he was a bug she wanted to squash. When she talked to him, her lips would curl into a little smirk, like she thought she was better than him. She'd say stuff under her breath, loud enough for him to hear but quiet enough to pretend she didn't mean it. Some people don't know how to live right, she'd mutter. Or, this neighborhood was perfect before he showed up. That smirk of hers, it was like a weapon. It said, you're nothing, Jake. You don't belong here. And she didn't stop with him. Oh no, she took it further. Karen loved to talk to the other neighbors. She'd walk around the street with that clipboard, knocking on doors or catching people in their yards. Have you seen that new guy, Jake? She'd say, her eyes all wide like she was sharing a big secret. He doesn't fit in here. I bet he's trouble. She'd lean in close, whispering like she was a spy, spreading little stories about him. His grass is always messy, she'd complain. And that mailbox? It's not even the right size. Who does he think he is? She'd shake her head, acting all worried, like Jake was some big danger to the neighborhood. We don't need people like him around, she'd say, loud enough for everyone to hear. Most people believed her. Why wouldn't they? Karen was the boss of the block. She'd been in charge of the HOA forever. She made sure the street looked perfect, every lawn green, every house clean. If she said Jake was trouble, well, it must be true, right? Neighbors started looking at Jake funny. The old man who used to nod at him. He stopped waving. The lady next door who'd smiled once. She'd look away now. Even the kids on their bikes would whisper when they rode by his house. "That's the weird guy," they'd say. "Karen says he's bad news." Jake could feel it, the whole street turning against him, all because of Karen's big mouth. But Jake? He didn't say a word. He didn't march over to Karen's house and yell, "Stop talking about me." He didn't knock on doors and tell the neighbors, "She's wrong, I'm a good guy." Nope. He stayed quiet. Too quiet, maybe. He'd sit on his porch sometimes, sipping his lemonade, watching the world go by. If Karen walked past, he'd just nod, like nothing was wrong. If a neighbor gave him a funny look, he'd smile and keep going. He didn't fight. He didn't complain. It was like he didn't care what they thought. Or maybe like he was waiting for something. Something big. Something that would change everything. And trust me, friends, something was coming. Karen didn't know it. The neighbors didn't know it. But Jake? He knew. He wasn't just some guy who let people walk all over him. He wasn't weak or scared. He was smart. He was patient. Every time Karen snapped at him, every time she spread a rumor, he tucked it away in his mind. He remembered it all. He didn't forget a single smirk or mean word. He was like a hunter, watching and waiting for the right moment to move. Karen thought she was in charge, but she didn't see the storm building up right in front of her. Let's talk about one day that really showed how bad things were getting. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where you want to be outside. Jake was in his yard, pulling a few weeds. Nothing big, just keeping things tidy. He had a little bucket next to him, tossing the weeds in as he went. He wasn't loud or messy. He was just a guy taking care of his lawn. But then, here comes Karen. Clomp, 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 her shoes hit the sidewalk like drums. She had that clipboard again, and her face was redder than a tomato. She stopped right at Jake's fence, staring at him like he'd just kicked a puppy. "What are you doing?" she barked. Jake looked up, wiping dirt off his hands. "Just pulling weeds," he said, nice and calm. But Karen wasn't calm. "Those weeds are against the rules," she yelled. "You're supposed to keep your yard perfect. And look, there's a weed over there you missed." She pointed across his lawn like it was the end of the world. Jake squinted at the tiny weed she meant. It was so small you could barely see it. "I'll get it," he said, still cool as ice. But Karen wasn't done. "You better," she snapped. "People like you ruin this street." Then she turned and stormed off, muttering loud enough for him to hear, "He doesn't belong here." Jake watched her go. He didn't say anything. He just picked up his bucket and kept working. But inside, that volcano was bubbling. "People like you," she'd said. Those words stuck in his head. He wasn't mad about the weeds or the rules. He was mad about the way she treated him, like he was less than her, like he didn't deserve to be there. He didn't show it, though. He finished his yard, went inside, and shut the door. Quiet again. Always quiet. The neighbors saw that little fight, of course. A few were outside watering plants, walking dogs. They heard Karen yelling, saw her stomp away. And later that day, she made her rounds. "Did you see Jake today?" she'd say to them. "He can't even keep his yard right. I told him the rules, but he doesn't care. He's trouble, I'm telling you." People nodded, agreeing with her because that's what they always did. "Yeah, Karen's right," they'd say. "He's weird. Too quiet. What's he hiding?" The rumors got bigger. Some said Jake was lazy. Others said he was sneaky. One lady even said, maybe he's got something bad in that house. All because of Karen. Jake knew they were talking. He'd hear whispers when he walked to his mailbox. He'd see eyes peeking from windows. But he didn't let it show. He'd grab his mail, wave if someone looked his way, and go back inside. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just kept living his life, day after day, like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. Karen was making his life harder, turning everyone against him. And that anger inside him, it wasn't going away. It was growing, slow and steady, like a fire that starts small but keeps burning hotter. Karen didn't stop, either. She kept coming by, finding new things to complain about. One day it was his trash can, you left it out too long. The next it was his car, it's parked 2 inches off the line. She'd write it all down on her clipboard, like she was building a big case against him. She'd smirk every time, that same mean smirk, like she was winning a game. And maybe she thought she was. She was the queen, right? The boss of the block. She could say whatever she wanted, and people listened. Jake was just the new guy, nobody cared what he thought. But Jake wasn't nobody. He wasn't weak. He was quiet, sure, but that didn't mean he was scared. Every time Karen snapped at him, every time she judged him, he got a little stronger. Not in a loud way, but in a smart way. He was watching her, too. He saw how she acted, how she talked, how she treated people. He didn't miss a thing. And that secret he had. It was still there, waiting. Karen thought she knew everything, but she didn't know Jake. Not really. She didn't know what he was capable of. So, there they were, Karen pushing and pushing, Jake staying quiet but boiling inside. The neighbors picking sides, most of them with Karen because she was loud and in charge. Tension was building, like a rubber band stretched tight, ready to snap. Something had to give. Something had to happen. And it was coming, friends. Oh, it was coming. Jake wasn't going to stay quiet forever. Karen wasn't going to win this game. The street was about to see something big, something nobody expected. Okay, friends, let's keep this story rolling. Things are getting exciting now. Weeks went by after Karen started picking on Jake, and guess what? She didn't get nicer. Nope, she got worse. Way worse. Every day felt like a new battle for Jake, with Karen finding more things to complain about. She was like a storm that wouldn't stop, loud, pushy, and always in his face. Jake tried to stay cool, but Karen? She was testing him big time. And one day, something happened that made everything even crazier. Let's dive in. So, picture this, it's a sunny morning, and Jake decides to do something simple. He puts up a tiny doorbell camera on his front door. You know those little cameras people get? They're super small, like the size of a candy bar, and they help you see who's at your door. Jake got one because he ordered stuff online like socks or maybe a cool book, and he wanted to make sure nobody took his packages. It wasn't a big deal. Just a normal thing lots of people do. He screwed it into the wall by his door, turned it on, and smiled. There, he thought. Now I can relax. It was all about keeping his stuff safe. Simple, right? But Karen? Oh boy, she didn't think it was simple. Not at all. She was walking by Jake's house like she did every day, snooping around, and she saw that camera. Her eyes got big, her face turned red, and you could almost see steam coming out of her ears. She didn't walk over calmly to ask about it. Nope. She stormed over, like a bull charging at a red flag. Her shoe slammed against the ground, bam, 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 and she stopped right in front of Jake's porch. Jake was inside, but he heard her coming. He peeked out the window and saw her standing there, hands on her hips, looking madder than ever. You're spying on us, she yelled, pointing at the camera like it was a monster. Her voice was so loud the whole street could hear her. What do you think you're doing? That thing's watching everybody. I'm calling the cops. She was shaking, her cheeks all red, and her eyes were wild. To her, that tiny camera wasn't just a camera, it was proof Jake was up to something bad. She didn't even ask him why he had it. She just decided right then and there that he was a sneaky, no good guy trying to spy on the whole neighborhood. Jake stepped outside to talk to her. He wasn't mad, at least, not on the outside. He stayed calm, like always. It's just a camera, lady, he said, holding up his hands like he was trying to slow her down. It's for my packages. Relax. His voice was soft, not loud or mean. He didn't want a fight. He just wanted her to chill out and see it wasn't a big deal. Most people would have nodded and said, oh, okay, that makes sense. But Karen? She wasn't most people. She didn't listen. She didn't care what Jake said. She'd already made up her mind, and nothing was going to change it. "No way," she shouted back, stepping closer to him. "You're lying. That camera's for spying, and I won't let you get away with it." She whipped out her phone from her pocket, fast as lightning, and started dialing. Jake just stood there, watching her. She held the phone to her ear and screeched into it, "Hello, 911? Yes, there's a suspicious man harassing the neighborhood. He's got a camera spying on us. Send help quick." Her voice was so high and wild, it sounded like she was in a movie. She kept glaring at Jake while she talked, like she'd caught him stealing cookies or something. Jake didn't say anything else. He shook his head, turned around, and went back inside. He wasn't scared or yelling. He just walked to his window and watched her out there, still talking on the phone, waving her arms like a crazy person. Most people would have been worried, right? I mean, someone calling the cops on you sounds scary. But Jake? He wasn't worried. Not one bit. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and waited. A little smile even crept onto his face. Why wasn't he freaking out? Oh, friends, you'll find out soon. Something big was hiding up his sleeve, and Karen had no clue. While Jake watched from inside, Karen kept going nuts outside. She didn't just call the cops and leave. Nope, she stayed right there on his lawn, pacing back and forth, talking loud so everyone could hear. "He thinks he can spy on us," she yelled to nobody. "Not on my street. I'm in charge here." Neighbors started peeking out their windows, curious about all the noise. The old man with the flowers stopped watering. The lady next door stuck her head out her door. Even the kids on their bikes slowed down to stare. Karen loved it. She wanted an audience. She wanted everyone to see her saving the neighborhood from Jake. Inside, Jake's volcano was still bubbling. That anger he kept locked up? It was getting hotter. He didn't like Karen yelling lies about him. He didn't like her making him look bad. But he didn't run out and argue. He didn't shout back. He just watched, quiet as ever, letting her dig her own hole. See, Jake wasn't dumb. He knew something Karen didn't. Her big move calling the cops was about to backfire. Big time. She thought she was winning, but she was wrong. And Jake? He was ready for it. Let's talk about what happened next, because this is where things start to get juicy. The police car showed up fast. Its lights flashed red and blue, spinning like a carnival ride. The siren wasn't on, but you could hear the tires crunching on the road as it pulled up to Jake's house. Two cops stepped out, big guys with shiny badges and serious faces. Karen ran over to them, waving her arms like she was flagging down a plane. "Over here," she shouted. "It's him. He's the one with the camera." She pointed at Jake's house, all proud, like she'd just solved a huge mystery. The cops walked over, slow and steady. One of them had a notepad, ready to write stuff down. The other just looked around, checking things out. Karen kept talking, fast and loud. "He put up that camera to spy on us," she said. "He's suspicious. He doesn't belong here. I've been watching him, and he's trouble." She went on and on, telling them about his grass, his mailbox, his quiet ways, everything she hated about him. To her, it was all proof Jake was some kind of bad guy. She crossed her arms and smirked, waiting for the cops to agree with her. Jake stepped outside again. He didn't rush or look nervous. He walked out slow, hands in his pockets, like he was just saying hi to a friend. The cops turned to him, and one said, "Sir, we got a call about a camera." "What's going on?" His voice was calm, not mad. Jake nodded. "Yeah, I put it up," he said. "It's just for my packages. I'm not spying on anybody." He pointed at the tiny camera, still hanging by his door. It didn't look scary or sneaky, just a little black box doing its job. Karen jumped in. "He's lying," she yelled. "He's up to something. You need to arrest him." She was so sure the cops would take her side. After all, she was the HOA queen. People listened to her. She'd called them, so they'd do what she wanted, right? But here's where the small revelations start popping up, little hints that something's different about Jake. The cop with the notepad looked at him and said, "Wait a sec. You're Jake Miller, right?" Jake nodded, still calm. Yeah, that's me. The cop smiled. Not a big grin, just a little one, like he knew something. Okay, we'll handle this, he said to Karen. She blinked, confused. Why wasn't he mad at Jake? Why wasn't he pulling out handcuffs? The other cop looked at the camera, then back at Jake, and didn't say anything. They weren't acting like Karen expected. She thought they'd yell at him, maybe take him away. But they didn't. They just stood there, chill as could be. Karen's smirk started to fade. Something wasn't right, and she could feel it. Jake didn't explain more. He didn't need to. He just watched the cops, then glanced at Karen. That little smile was still on his face, not mean, not loud, just there. Karen didn't get it. She didn't know why he wasn't scared. She didn't know why the cops weren't jumping to her side. But us? We're starting to see it, friends. Jake wasn't worried because he had a secret. A big one. And it was tied to those cops somehow. Karen's big plan to get him in trouble? It wasn't working. It was falling apart right in front of her, and she didn't even know why yet. The neighbors were watching all this, too. They'd gathered now, some on their porches, some by their fences. They whispered to each other, pointing at Jake, the cops, and Karen. What's happening, they'd say. Why's she so mad about a camera? They didn't understand, but they were hooked. They wanted to know what was going on. And Karen? She kept talking, trying to make the cops see her side. He's dangerous, she said. He's been weird since he got here. But the cops just nodded, like they were only half listening. Jake stayed quiet, letting it all play out. He didn't need to say much. He didn't need to fight. He knew something Karen didn't, and that made him strong. That volcano inside him. It was still there, still hot, but he kept it under control. He wasn't going to blow up, not yet. He was waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment was coming closer, step by step. Karen thought she was in charge, but she was wrong. Her big move with the 911 call? It was about to turn into a big mistake. So, friends, what do you think so far? Why isn't Jake scared of the cops? What's his secret? And how mad do you think Karen's gonna get when she finds out? Drop your guesses in the comments. I love hearing what you think. This story's heating up, and the best part's still ahead. Stick with me, because you won't believe what happens next. Alright, friends, here we go. This is the big moment you've been waiting for. Things are about to get wild on Jake's street. Picture this, a police car zooms up fast, its lights flashing red and blue like a spinning top. It stops right in front of Jake's house with a little screech of the tires. Everyone hears it. Neighbors peek out their windows, kids stop riding their bikes, and even the birds seem to hush up. Something big is happening, and everybody knows it. Karen's standing there on Jake's lawn, arms crossed tight, smirking like she's the smartest person in the world. She's sure she's won this fight. She called the cops, and now they're here to take Jake away. Or so she thinks. Jake. He's not freaking out. Not even a little. He steps outside his house, cool as a cucumber, hands stuffed in his pockets like he's just going for a walk. No sweat on his face, no worry in his eyes, just calm. He stands on his porch, watching everything, while Karen keeps that smug grin on her face. The neighbors are whispering now, their heads poking out from behind curtains and doors. What's going on, they say to each other. Did Karen finally get him? They're all watching, waiting to see what happens next. It's like a big show, and Jake's house is the stage. Two cops climb out of the car. They're big guys, wearing dark uniforms with shiny badges that catch the sunlight. One's got a notepad in his hand, flipping it open like he's ready to write down every word. The other just stands there, looking around with sharp eyes, taking it all in. They walk up to Jake's yard, slow and steady, their boots crunching on the gravel. Karen doesn't waste a second. She runs over to them, her arms flapping like a bird. Over here, she yells, pointing at Jake. This guy's trouble. He's got cameras, he's sneaking around. Do something. Her voice is loud and fast, like she's trying to spill all her complaints at once. She's so sure the cops are going to grab Jake and drag him off. She's practically bouncing, waiting for it to happen. The cop with the notepad looks at her, his face blank. Okay, "Ma'am, calm down," he says. "Tell us what's wrong." Karen takes a big breath and starts her rant. "He put up a camera," she says, jabbing her finger at the little black box by Jake's door. "He's spying on us. He's been weird since he moved in. His grass is too long, his mailbox is wrong, he's too quiet. He doesn't belong here. I called you because he's harassing the whole neighborhood." She keeps going, piling up every little thing she hates about Jake. To her, it's all proof he's some kind of bad guy. She crosses her arms again, smirking even bigger, like she's just dropped the best story ever. The neighbors lean closer to their windows, listening hard. They've heard Karen complain about Jake before, but this is next level. "A camera," one lady whispers to her husband. "Is he really spying?" A kid on a bike says, "Cool, like a secret agent." They're all hooked, waiting to see what the cops do. Karen's sure they'll agree with her. She's the HOA queen, right? She's the boss. She called them, so they'll listen to her. That's how it works in her head. She stands there, tall and proud, ready to watch Jake get in big trouble. But then bam, something wild happens. The cop with the notepad stops her. "Ma'am, hold on," he says, raising a hand. His voice is firm but not mean. Karen blinks, surprised. She's not used to being interrupted. "What?" she snaps, her smirk slipping a little. The cop looks over at Jake, who's still standing there, chill as ever. "You said Jake Miller, right?" he asks. Karen nods, all smug again. "Yeah, that's him. Jake Miller, the troublemaker." She points at Jake like he's a villain in a cartoon, waiting for the cops to pounce. And here's where it gets good, friends. The cop doesn't pounce. He doesn't frown or pull out handcuffs. Instead, he grins. A big, friendly grin, like he's seeing an old buddy. "Yeah, we know Jake," he says, looking right at him. "He's one of us." The other cop nods, a little smile on his face too. Karen freezes. Her jaw drops, literally drops, like in a funny movie. Her eyes get huge, and that smirk? It's gone, wiped clean off her face. The neighbors gasp, loud enough to hear through the windows. "What?" they whisper. "One of us? What does that mean?" Jake doesn't say a word. He just stands there, hands still in his pockets, watching it all. But that little smile on his face? It gets a tiny bit bigger. Not loud, not showy, just enough to show he's not surprised. Karen stammers, What? What do you mean, one of us?" Her voice is shaky now, not loud anymore. She's confused, and it's starting to hit her that something's wrong. Really wrong. The cop turns to her, still grinning. "Jake's a cop," he says, simple as that. "An undercover cop. He's been working a case right here in the neighborhood." Boom. There it is, the big reveal. Jake isn't just some random guy. He's not a troublemaker or a weirdo. He's a cop, a secret cop. Undercover means he's been hiding who he really is, pretending to be a regular person while he does his job. He moved into that little house with the red door not just to live there, but to watch something. Something important. Something the neighborhood didn't even know about. And Karen? She had no clue. None at all. She thought she was so smart, calling the cops on him, but she just dialed her own doom. The neighbors lose it. "A cop," the old man with the flowers says, dropping his hose. "Undercover," the lady next door squeaks, her eyes wide. The kids on their bikes cheer, "That's so cool." They're all buzzing now, talking fast, pointing at Jake like he's a superhero. Karen's standing there, mouth open, looking like someone just pulled a rug out from under her. But, she stutters, trying to find words. "He can't be. He's just Jake." She's shaking her head, like if she says it enough, it won't be true. But it is true. And it's hitting her hard. The cop with the notepad chuckles. "Yep, just Jake," he says. "Our Jake. Been working with us for months." He looks at Jake and gives him a little nod, like they're on the same team. Because they are. Jake nods back, still quiet, still calm. The other cop walks over to the camera by the door and taps it. "This? Just a doorbell cam," he says. "Nothing sneaky about it." Helps him keep an eye on things for his job. He winks at Jake, and Jake shrugs, like it's no big deal. But to Karen, it's a huge deal. Her whole plan's falling apart, and she can't stop it. Karen's face goes from red to white. She's not smirking anymore, she's panicking. No, 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 she says, waving her hands. He's lying. You're all lying. He's not a cop, he's trouble. I know it. She's yelling again, but it's different now. It's not strong or sure, it's desperate. She's trying to hold onto her story, but it's slipping away like sand through her fingers. The cops don't even argue with her. They just look at her, calm and steady, letting her yell herself out. The neighbors watch, whispering more. She's wrong, they say. Jake's a cop? That's awesome. Let's rewind a bit, friends, so you can see how big this is. All those weeks Karen was bossing Jake around, telling him his grass was too tall, his mailbox was wrong, he was too quiet. She thought she had him figured out. She thought he was some nobody she could push around. She'd smirk and mutter, he doesn't belong here, and spread rumors to make everyone hate him. She called the cops because of that camera, sure she'd finally get him kicked out. But now, the cops are here, and they're not mad at Jake, they're buddies with him. Her big 911 call didn't get Jake in trouble, it got her in trouble. Oh man, what a twist. The cop with the notepad flips it shut and looks at Karen. Ma'am, he says, his voice a little harder now, you called us about a suspicious man. But Jake's not suspicious. He's one of us. You know what's suspicious? Making a fake 911 call. Karen's eyes get even bigger. Fake, she squeaks. It wasn't fake. I thought he was bad. The cop shakes his head. Doesn't matter what you thought. You can't call us unless it's real. That's the law. He steps closer to her, and the other cop moves too, like they're a team. Karen backs up, her hands shaking. The neighbors are buzzing louder now. She's in trouble, the old man says. Serves her right, the lady next door whispers. The kids on their bikes giggle, pointing at Karen. She messed up, they say. Jake just watches, still quiet, still calm. That volcano inside him. It's not boiling over, it's cooling down. He doesn't need to yell or fight. The truth's out, and it's doing all the work for him. Karen's the one freaking out now, not him. Her big plan backfired, and everyone can see it. Karen tries one more time. But I'm the HOA president, she says, like that'll save her. I keep the street safe. The cop with the notepad raises an eyebrow. Safe, he says. Jake's been keeping it safe. You've been causing trouble. He points at Jake, who just shrugs again. Karen's mouth opens, then closes, like a fish out of water. She's got nothing left to say. The cops know Jake. They trust him. And her? They're not so sure about her anymore. The big reveal's sinking in now, friends. Jake's not just a guy with a camera, he's an undercover cop, working a secret case right under everyone's noses. All those times Karen judged him, all those rumors she spread, they're crashing down around her. The neighbors aren't whispering about Jake anymore, they're whispering about her. She was wrong the whole time, they say. Jake's a hero. The street's flipping upside down, and Karen's stuck in the middle, looking smaller than ever. So, what do you think, friends? How cool is it that Jake's a cop? Did you guess his secret? And what's gonna happen to Karen now? Drop your ideas in the comments, I can't wait to hear them. This is the big moment, but the story's not over yet. Stick around, because there's more coming, and it's gonna be awesome. Alright, friends, here we are, the part where everything gets wrapped up. This is the moment when the storm calms down, and we see who's left standing. It's a big one, so get comfy, because things are about to feel really good. Let's jump right in. So, picture this, the police car's lights are still flashing, red and blue spinning across Jake's yard. The two cops, those big guys with the shiny badges, turn to Karen. Their faces aren't friendly anymore. No more grins, no more chuckles. Now they're serious, like teachers when you've broken a big rule. Karen's standing there, her arms still crossed, but that smirk she had, it's long gone. She looks smaller now, not so tough. The cop with the notepad steps closer to her and says, "Ma'am, False 911 calls are a crime. You're coming with us. His voice is low and firm, like he's not messing around. Karen's eyes go wide, bigger than dinner plates. What? She squeaks, her voice all high and shaky. A crime? No, no, no. You've got it wrong. She starts waving her hands, trying to back away, but the cops don't budge. False calls, the other cop says, crossing his arms. That means calling us when there's no real problem. You said Jake was trouble, but he's not. He's a cop. You lied. Karen's mouth opens and closes, like she's a fish flopping on the ground. But he's the problem, she yells, pointing at Jake. Not me. He's the one with the camera. He's sneaky. The cops don't even blink. They're not buying it, not one bit. The one with the notepad shakes his head. Jake's not the problem, he says. You are. You can't call 911 just because you don't like somebody. That's not how it works. Karen's face goes red again, but not from anger this time, from panic. She's starting to see it now, her big plan didn't work. It's falling apart, and she's the one in trouble. The cop pulls out a pair of handcuffs from his belt. They're shiny and silver, and they jingle a little as he holds them up. Hands out, he says. You're coming with us. Karen freaks out. No way, she shouts, stepping back. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I keep this street perfect. She's yelling loud, like if she screams enough, they'll change their minds. But the cops don't care. The second one steps forward, calm but strong, and grabs her arm. Ma'am, stop, he says. You broke the law. Let's go. Karen tries to pull away, but he's too big, too steady. The handcuffs click snap, snap around her wrists. She's stuck now, no getting out of it. This is crazy, she cries. You're making a mistake. Let me go. They don't let her go. They start walking her to the police car, one cop on each side. She's still yelling, her voice bouncing off the houses. He's the bad guy. Not me. You've got it all wrong. She twists and turns, but the cops keep moving, slow and sure. They open the back door of the car, and with a little push, they stuff her inside. She's kicking her feet, banging her hands on the window, screaming the whole time. This isn't fair. I didn't do anything. Let me out. The door slams shut, and her voice gets muffled, but you can still hear her hollering as the cops climb into the front seats. Jake's just standing there on his porch, watching it all. He doesn't cheer or laugh. He doesn't even say a word. He shrugs his shoulders, like it's no big deal, and turns around. With his hands still in his pockets, he walks back inside his house and shuts the door. Quiet as ever. That's Jake, cool, calm, and not making a fuss. The neighbors, though. They're losing their minds. They can't believe what they just saw. Karen, the HOA tyrant, the queen of the street, the lady who bossed everybody around, she's gone. Handcuffed and hauled off in a police car. It's like a dream they never thought would come true. Let's talk about the neighbors for a sec, because they're a big part of this. They're all outside now, not just peeking anymore, but standing on their lawns, their porches, their driveways. The old man with the flowers drops his hose, letting water spill everywhere, his mouth hanging open. She's gone, he says, like he can't trust his own eyes. The lady next door steps out in her slippers, hugging herself, whispering, I didn't think they'd take her. The kids on their bikes ride in circles, laughing and shouting, Karen's in jail. Karen's in jail. It's chaos, good chaos, the kind where everybody's talking at once, trying to figure out what just happened. They look at Jake's house, where the door's closed now. He's a cop, the old man says, scratching his head. A real cop? Undercover. The lady nods, her eyes big. That's what they said. He's been here all this time, and we didn't know. The kids stop their bikes and stare. He's like a superhero, one yells. Yeah, with a secret identity, another adds. They're grinning, excited, like Jake's the coolest guy they've ever heard of. The whispers turn into chatter, and the chatter turns into a big buzz. The whole street's alive with it. Karen's gone, Jake's a hero, and everything's flipping upside down. Karen's still yelling in the car as the cops start the engine. You can hear her through the window, even as they pull away. This is wrong. I'll tell everybody. You can't do this. Her voice fades as the car rolls down the street, lights still flashing, until it turns the corner and she's out of sight. The neighbors watch it go, some waving bye-bye with little smirks of their own. For once, Karen's not the one smirking, they are. She's not the boss anymore. She's just a lady in handcuffs, and they're free from her rules, her clipboard, her mean looks. Inside his house, Jake sits down on his couch. He grabs a glass of lemonade, yep, that same lemonade he loves, and takes a sip. He's not mad anymore. That volcano inside him. It's cooled off, quiet now. He did what he needed to do without even raising his voice. Karen took herself down, and he just watched it happen. He leans back, puts his feet up, and smiles a little. Not a big smile, just a tiny one, like he's happy with how things turned out. Outside, the street's buzzing, but in here? It's peaceful. That's how Jake likes it. Later that day, people start talking more. Word spreads fast, neighbors call their friends, kids tell their parents, and soon everybody knows the whole story. Turns out, Jake wasn't just chilling in that house for fun. He'd been tracking some shady stuff in the area, bad things Karen didn't even notice. What kind of stuff? Well, the cops don't say much, but people hear bits and pieces. Maybe some sneaky thieves were around, stealing stuff from garages. Or maybe someone was doing something worse, like selling bad things nobody should have. Jake was there to watch, to listen, to figure it out. He was quiet because he had to be undercover. Cops can't let anybody know who they are. And he was good at it, too. Karen didn't see any of that. She was too busy measuring grass and checking mailboxes. She thought she was keeping the street safe, but she didn't know the real danger. Jake did. He'd been working hard, day after day, making sure the neighborhood was okay. All those times she yelled at him. He was probably thinking about his case, not her silly rules. She was loud, but she was blind. Jake was quiet, but he saw everything. And now, because of him, the street's safer. The shady stuff? It's gone, or at least getting handled, thanks to Jake and his cop friends. The neighbors start piecing it together. He wasn't weird, he was working, the old man says, laughing a little. We thought he was lazy, but he was a hero. The lady next door nods. Karen kept saying he didn't belong, but he was helping us the whole time. The kids ride by Jake's house again, looking at it like it's a castle now. He's the coolest, they shout. Can we meet him? They don't knock, though they're too shy. But they're not scared of him anymore. They're proud he's there. Days go by, and things settle down. The police don't say much about Karen, just that she's in trouble for the fake 911 call. Maybe she'll pay a fine, maybe she'll sit in jail a little while. Nobody knows for sure, but one thing's clear, she's not the HOA president anymore. Someone else takes over, a nice lady who doesn't carry a clipboard or yell at people. She waves at Jake when she sees him, and he waves back. No rules about grass height, no notes about mailboxes. The street feels lighter, freer, like a big weight's been lifted off everybody's shoulders. Jake keeps living his life, same as always. He mows his lawn when he feels like it, not because someone's barking at him. He checks his little doorbell camera, smiling at the packages that show up safe. He sips his lemonade on Saturdays, sitting on his porch, watching the kids ride by. They wave at him now, and he waves back. The old man stops by sometimes, saying, "Thanks for what you did, Jake." The lady next door brings him cookies once, just to be nice. "You're a good guy," she says. Jake shrugs and says, "Just doing my job." He doesn't brag. He doesn't need to. Everybody knows now. The best part? No more clipboard lectures. Karen's gone, and her big list of rules goes with her. No more knocking on doors about trash cans. No more muttering about people who don't belong. The street's quiet, not the bad kind of quiet Karen hated, but the good kind where everybody's happy. Jake made that happen, without even trying hard. He didn't fight her with words or fists, he just let her trip over her own mess. And she did, big time. Let's think about Karen for a minute. She thought she was so smart, so in charge. She'd march around with that clipboard, telling everybody what to do, thinking she was the queen. She judged Jake from day one, his quiet ways, his simple house, his little camera. She spread rumors, turned people against him, called the cops to get him gone. But what did she get? Handcuffs and a ride in a police car. All her bossing, all her yelling, it didn't win. It lost. She didn't see the real Jake, and that was her mistake. She picked the wrong guy to mess with. Now, the neighbors look at Jake different. They don't whisper mean things anymore. They don't peek out their windows with frowns. They smile when they see him. They say hi. They're glad he's there. He's one of us, they say, not like the cops meant it, but like he belongs. And he does. He always did. Karen tried to push him out, but she couldn't. He's stronger than she ever was, not with muscles or loud words, but with truth. The truth won, and justice got served, plain and simple. The street's safer now, too. Whatever shady stuff Jake was tracking, it's not a problem anymore. People lock their doors less tight. Kids play outside longer. The old man waters his flowers without worrying. It's like the neighborhood took a big, happy breath, all because Jake did his job. Karen didn't know it, but she was the one making trouble, stirring up fights when there was real stuff to worry about. Jake fixed the real stuff, quiet as a mouse, and let her yell herself into a corner. Weeks later, people still talk about it. Remember when Karen called the cops on Jake, they say, laughing over coffee or fences. She thought she'd win, but nope. The kids make it a game, riding their bikes and pretending to be undercover cops like Jake. Freeze, bad guy, they shout, giggling. The lady who took over the HOA puts up a sign, not a mean one, but a nice one that says, "Welcome to our street." It's not about rules anymore, it's about being friends. Jake sees it from his porch and nods. He likes that. Jake doesn't change much. He's still the same guy, quiet, chill, sipping lemonade. He doesn't need a big thank you or a party. He's happy just living there, knowing the streets better because of him. The neighbors don't bug him too much, they respect his quiet ways now. But they're glad he's around. He's our cop, they say. Our guy. And that's enough for them and for Jake. So, friends, that's how it ends. Karen's gone, justice is served, and Jake's the hero without even trying. The street's free from her tyranny, no more clipboard, no more yelling, just peace. What do you think? How awesome is it that Jake turned it all around? Would you want him as your neighbor? Let me know in the comments, I can't wait to hear. This story's done, but the good vibes, they're sticking around, thanks to Jake. See you next time, friends, stay cool out there. Hey there, friends. We've made it to the end of this wild story about Jake and Karen, and now it's time to sit back and think about what it all means. This part isn't about action or big surprises, it's about looking at what happened and figuring out what we can take away from it. It's like when you finish a game and talk about what you learned, you know? So, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's chat about this adventure. It's gonna be fun, and maybe even a little inspiring, because this story has some big ideas hiding in it, ideas that can make us think and feel good. Ready? Let's go. So, here's the thing, sometimes the person you think is weak or out of place is the one holding all the cards. What does that mean? Well, let's look at Jake. When he moved into that little house with the red door, nobody thought much of him. He was quiet, kept to himself, didn't make a fuss. Karen saw him and decided right away he was nothing special, just a guy she could boss around. She thought he was weak because he didn't talk back, didn't fight her, didn't show off. To her, he was an easy target, someone she could pick on without a problem. She judged him by what she saw on the outside, a guy sipping lemonade, mowing his lawn, living a simple life. That's it? That's all she cared about. But Karen was wrong, super wrong. Jake wasn't weak. He wasn't nothing. He was holding all the cards, like in a game where you've got the best hand but don't tell anybody. He had a secret, a big one. He was an undercover cop, working hard to keep the neighborhood safe from shady stuff Karen didn't even notice. All those times she yelled at him about his grass or his mailbox, he was quietly doing something way more important. He wasn't just some random guy, he was a hero, hiding right there in plain sight. Karen never saw it coming, and that's the coolest part. The truth snuck up on her like a surprise party she didn't expect. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Think about it, who's really out there watching out for you, and who's just making noise? Karen was loud, super loud. She marched around with her clipboard, barking rules, telling everybody what to do. She thought that made her strong, that it made her the boss. She wanted everyone to listen to her, to think she was the one keeping the street perfect. But all that noise? It didn't mean much. It was just sound, like a radio turned up too high. She wasn't watching out for anybody, she was watching out for herself, trying to stay in charge. She didn't see the real stuff happening, the stuff Jake was handling. Her noise didn't help, it just got in the way. Jake, though. He was different. He didn't make noise. He didn't shout or brag or wave a clipboard. He was quiet, but that didn't mean he was weak. It meant he was smart. It meant he was strong in a way Karen couldn't understand. He was watching out for the neighborhood, keeping an eye on things, making sure everybody was safe. He didn't need to tell people, he just did it. That's the kind of person who's really looking out for you, the one who doesn't need to yell about it. The one who's there, doing the work, even if you don't notice them at first. Let's think about that for a minute. Have you ever met someone like Jake? Maybe a kid at school who's super quiet, doesn't talk a lot, but always helps when you need it? Or a teacher who doesn't yell but knows everything and makes class fun. Sometimes those people don't stand out right away. They're not loud or pushy. They don't try to be the center of attention. But when you look closer, you see they're doing big things, important things. They're the ones holding the cards, even if they don't show them off. And the loud ones, like Karen? Sometimes they're just making noise to feel big, not to help anybody. Karen judged Jake by what she saw, and that was her mistake. She looked at him and thought, he's quiet, he's new, he's not like us, he's weak. She didn't wait to learn more. She didn't ask questions or try to understand him. She just decided he was bad and ran with it. She spread rumors, called the cops, tried to push him out, all because of what she thought she saw. But she didn't see the real Jake. She didn't see the cop, the hero, the guy keeping her street safe. She missed the truth because she was too busy judging. And when the truth came out, it hit her like a ton of bricks. She never saw it coming, and that's what made it so wild. That's a big lesson right there, friends. Judging people by what you see on the outside can get you in trouble. You might think someone's weak or weird or not important, but you don't know their story. You don't know what they're hiding, what good stuff, what strong stuff. Jake looked like a quiet guy, but he was so much more. Karen looked like a boss, but she was just loud. Looks can trick you, you know. They can make you think you've got it all figured out, but then bam, the truth shows up and flips everything around. It's like opening a present and finding something way cooler than you expected. So, what can we take from this? Well, maybe it's this: don't be too quick to judge. Give people a chance. Look a little closer before you decide who they are. That quiet kid in class might be super smart or really kind. That person who doesn't talk much might be doing something amazing you don't see yet. And the loud ones? The ones who act like they're in charge? Maybe they're not as big as they think. Maybe they're just noise, and the real strength is somewhere else, waiting to surprise you. Jake showed us that, didn't he? He stayed quiet, did his job, and let the truth do the talking. And it worked big time. This story makes you wonder about other stuff, too. Who's watching out for you in your life? Maybe it's someone you don't even notice, a friend who's always there, a family member who helps without making a fuss, a neighbor who keeps an eye on things. They might not be loud about it, but they're there, holding the cards, keeping things good. And the people making noise? The ones bossing everybody around or complaining all the time? Maybe they're not the ones you need to listen to. Maybe they're just like Karen, loud but not really helping. It's kind of inspiring when you think about it. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to yell or show off to make a difference. Jake didn't. He was quiet, but he changed everything. He got rid of the shady stuff, got Karen out of the way, and made the street better, all without raising his voice. That's real power, friends. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight. The kind that just happens, steady and sure, like a river carving a path through rock. You don't see it moving fast, but it's strong, and it gets the job done. What if we tried that sometimes? What if we didn't worry about being the loudest or the bossiest? What if we just did our thing, helped out, and let the good stuff show itself? Jake didn't need to fight Karen with words, he let her trip over her own mess. He didn't need to prove anything to the neighbors, they figured it out when the time was right. Maybe we can be like that, too. Quiet but strong. Helpful but not pushy. Holding our cards until the moment's perfect. It's a cool way to be, don't you think? And here's another thing to chew on, the truth always comes out. Karen thought she could hide behind her rules and her clipboard, but she couldn't. She thought she could make Jake look bad, but the truth showed up and flipped the game. It's like the sun coming out after a rainy day, you can't stop it. So, if you're ever in a spot where someone's judging you wrong, don't worry too much. Keep doing your thing, like Jake did. The truth's got your back, it'll shine when it's ready. That's a happy thought, right? It means good wins, even if it takes a little while. Let's imagine something for a sec. Picture you're Jake, living on that street. Karen's yelling at you, neighbors are whispering, but you've got a secret, a good one. You know you're doing something awesome, even if nobody sees it yet. How would that feel? Pretty cool, huh? Knowing you're strong inside, even if people don't get it? That's what Jake had. He didn't let Karen's noise shake him. He didn't care about her smirks or her rules. He knew who he was, and that was enough. Maybe we can be like that, too sure of ourselves, even when the world's loud and messy. Or what if you're one of the neighbors? You listened to Karen at first, thought Jake was weird. But then you saw the truth, and it changed everything. Maybe you'd feel a little silly for believing her, but also happy you were wrong. It'd make you think twice next time, wouldn't it? Next time someone's loud and bossy, you might wonder, are they right, or is there more to the story? That's a smart way to be curious, not quick to pick sides. It's like being a detective in your own life, looking for the real deal. This story's got a lot to say, doesn't it? It's not just about Jake and Karen, it's about us, too. About how we see people, how we act, how we find the good stuff hiding in plain sight. It's inspiring because it shows quiet can be powerful. It shows truth can beat noise. It shows you don't have to be the loudest to win, you just have to be real. Jake was real, and that's why he came out on top. Karen wasn't, and that's why she fell. Simple, but big. So, what do you think, friends? What hit you the most about this story? Did it make you wonder about the quiet people in your life? Or maybe the loud ones? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I love hearing what you've got to say. It's like we're all sitting around a campfire, swapping ideas. And if you enjoyed this wild ride with Jake and Karen, give it a thumbs up. It's been a blast telling you this tale, and I hope it stuck with you a little. Maybe it'll pop into your head next time you see someone quiet or someone noisy and you'll wonder, who's really holding the cards here? This isn't goodbye, it's just a see you later. There's more stories out there, more adventures to share, and I can't wait to bring you the next one. Until then, stay curious out there, friends. Keep your eyes open, your ears ready, and your heart big. You never know who's watching out for you, or what truth's waiting to surprise you. Jake showed us that, and now it's our turn to look for it. Catch you in the next one, be awesome, okay?